Let's talk about the tone of Call of Duty Zombies. If you ask me, this is one of the more important aspects of the game because it sets it so far apart from everything else. If you look at the campaign and the multiplayer, it's very fast-paced action movie kind of style, but when you switch to zombies, suddenly it slows way down and it gives you this sense of like loneliness and that you're in danger. It's a very different style within the same game. And if you ask me, I feel like every game that's included zombies has done this pretty well, except for Cold War. Now, Cold War's tone isn't all bad. The round-based maps, if you ask me, have good atmosphere, especially the indoor parts. I like the bunker in Die Maschine with the ghostly whispers and how dark it is. I like the generator areas in Firebase Z, and the idea of this dark ether dimension being full of these unimaginable horrors that are going to kill you. I think it's interesting. I want to know more about it. You know, there are good things in the tone of this game, but I feel like there are a lot of bad things too that could be fixed that would improve the game. The first of which being the early rounds just being too easy and having no tension. The main reason for this is because the zombies only do like 30 damage per hit, and it's 5 hits to down you. There is almost no danger in the early rounds. You know, if you look back at the older games, when you were 2 or 3 hit down, the early rounds were a bit more tense and it forced you to play differently. But now you basically spawn with Juggernog, so where's the tension? You know, you can afford to make mistakes around a corner and hit a zombie because you can very easily get away from it, but in earlier games, that could have been a game-ending mistake. I'm also not too fond of how fast-paced, I guess you could say, the spawn rooms are. I feel like on these maps, all the zombies spawn in real quick and you can get through it fast. So if you ask me, some of the spawns in the first room should be disabled, at least for the first few rounds, and then in later rounds they can open up the rest of them so that that room stays hectic and the difficulty is consistent with the rest of the map. If they did that, as well as increase the zombie damage in the first rounds, it would be very beneficial for the tone and pacing and atmosphere of the game. It would create more of a creepy vibe in the first few rounds, and it would contrast better with the later rounds when it's fast and hectic. I also have issues with the HUD, mostly because of how much information it shows you at a time. Now, if you ask me, if you want to create a scary horror experience, you have to keep information from a player. You know, your health bar with the exact amount of health points you have, armor, your name, minimap, objective markers, it's just a little too much. I wish we could just turn off a lot of these settings. I appreciate how much HUD control we already have in this game, but I wish there was more. And I imagine the reason they do this is to help out newer players who are playing zombies for the first time or the first time in a long time maybe. But to an experienced player like myself and a lot of other people, a lot of this unnecessary information feels kind of condescending. Like, sure, it's nice to have the markers the first time you play a map so you can find your way through it, but on the 20th, 30th, 100th time you play the map, you don't need that stuff there anymore. Some of the enemies, I feel, could use some tweaks, just some minor ones. Most of them are fine. I think the Manglers can be a little weak once you realize you can shoot them in the cannon and almost insta-kill them. Maybe taking out that cannon should just remove all the armor instead of reducing 75% of their health or whatever it feels like. Mimics, I think, could use a bit more work. I really like the idea of not being able to trust the items on the ground, not knowing whether or not it's a mimic or real. But they're kind of weak once they actually spawn in. I feel like they would be better if they did more damage. So that way when you know there's a mimic in the area or something, you would have to tread more carefully because if you set it off, it could take you out real quick. But it's also really quick to take out if you're prepared for it. I also think it would be cool if you found the item that they're hiding as and you shoot it, it would maybe take out half their health just as a bonus for being extra perceptive. But yeah, I think the mimics could use a bit more development. And finally, my biggest pet peeve with this game is the announcers and just how much they talk. It almost comes off as if they're trying to hold your hand through the map and trying to think for you instead of letting you kind of experience the map and come to your own conclusions about things. Like, for example, the bunker door in Die Maschine. As soon as you walk up to it and it starts opening, one of them gets on the radio and tells you about how weird it is that it's opening. Now, if they maybe waited a little longer before playing that quote, or even just cut it completely, I think it would be a bit more beneficial for the overall atmosphere.
Eyes open. SIGINT didn't suggest anyone else at the site.
There's also on Firebase Z, as soon as you get to the main area, Peck will immediately get on the radio and talk about how you're there. Again, if they waited a bit before that played, it would be a bit better, but I also think it's not 100% necessary.
I suppose I shouldn't be surprised you're here. Makes sense. Max is working with Requiem. Let's make a deal.
But then there are some that I think are just horrible, like in Onslaught, every single time you step out of the zone, Weaver will get on the radio to tell you about how you're out of the zone, you have to get back in, but there's plenty of visual and audio cues already to tell you that you're outside of the zone. I don't think Weaver getting back on the radio was necessary. And also, every 3 rounds he'll get on to tell you that a boss zombie's coming in, and that's not necessary either because there's also audio and visual cues to let you know that's coming. Honestly, overall, I will turn off the voice volume in this game just because I think it's better without them constantly being in your ear holding your hand through these maps. But yeah, those are my overall thoughts on the tone and atmosphere of Cold War Zombies. Like, the maps and the design and the game itself is fine. I think they just went too far with the announcers and the HUD and the early rounds just kind of being too easy. It could be made so much better. I imagine the reason for a lot of this is them appealing to new players, but I think what they're forgetting is that you're only a new player once. And if you're an experienced player, or you've been playing the game a lot and you've become experienced, all this hand-holdy stuff starts to feel condescending rather than beneficial to the game.
About time you